Welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm your host, Trevor Scott, coming at you today with the waiver wire Week 5 and the trade targets for Week 5. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. For our two waiver wire ads of the week, we have Dontayvion Wicks and Trey Sermon. So starting with Dontayvion Wicks, this one 18% rostered and directly correlates to the Christian Watson injury. Christian Watson has a high ankle sprain, is an IR candidate. And really, Dontayvion Wicks stepped in during this game and was phenomenal. 5 catches, 89 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's very, very good player. And honestly, it almost looks like they should just play him instead of Christian Watson anyways. So I know Watson came in with a lot of expectations. He has been the most productive touchdown scorer for this offense. But overall, Wicks has just looked so good when he gets the opportunity. So I don't think this offense misses a beat with him. And this is one that I would really be trying to get onto my team. Somebody that I think is a plug and play start next week against the Rams. I do think that they have a chance to go off here, have very high totals again. And so Wicks is somebody that I would be actively targeting. I wouldn't go crazy with Fab. I do think, even though I do think he could be a plug and play starter, it is still a decently crowded offense. And Watson will be back towards the end of the year. So although you may keep him all year, I think like a 10% or 12% bid here is probably appropriate to try and get him. Again, one of those things where if you don't get him for that price, kind of tip your cap and you move on to one of these other guys we're going to talk about that are $0 bids. Plus, you're likely replacing somebody on your bench that's pretty decent at this point with all the waiver wire ads through 4 weeks. So you want to make sure you continue to evaluate your roster spot at a higher than 0 value. The second guy here, Trey Sermon, I put him here as the waiver wire ad of the week because if you are a Jonathan Taylor owner, he's got to be your priority here because there's a chance that Taylor misses 1-2 games. Hopefully that's the extent of it, but high ankle sprain is not something you want to see. It's a similar injury that he dealt with 2 years ago when he came back after like 3 or 4 games, but then just wasn't the same the rest of the year. They are saying it's mild, but I'm not entirely sure what that means. When you have a high ankle sprain, that's just a severe injury on its face, right? So mild high ankle sprain, it's the mechanism, it's the location for high ankle, but didn't really get rolled up on too heavily. So hopefully he's good, but if he misses this week, Trey Sermon is somebody that you're going to need to replace that spot. So I would try and make it a priority to get Sermon. Again, not a big bid here because if you don't have Jonathan Taylor, maybe you're throwing a couple bucks at Sermon for your flex this week type of thing. But Jonathan Taylor also isn't even guaranteed to be out. So maybe 5% here on Trey Sermon. Going into the rest of the waiver wire, right? We have a very good waiver wire week. So I'm very excited to talk about a lot of these players, honestly. So starting with the quarterbacks, obviously we're from a SuperFlex perspective. So these are going to be recurring names. There's just not a lot of options in your SuperFlex leagues. However, this week we do have Joe Flacco, right? Anthony Richardson might not miss the game, and he is considered day-to-day, not week-to-week. So there is a chance with that hip injury that he is back this week. But again, if you have Anthony Richardson, or if you're just looking for quarterback help, it's not a bad idea to throw a couple bucks at Joe Flacco. If you're an Anthony Richardson owner, maybe you throw a couple additional dollars at him. Maybe a $5 bid in your SuperFlex leagues on Joe Flacco. Going down to the other 2 quarterbacks, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. We've already talked about both of these guys. Huntley, it's finally validating to see that he is the starter, and they're going to start playing here tonight. But overall, or I guess you're going to be watching this tomorrow. I'm recording this right as that game is about to start. But it is good to see. We've been recommending Huntley for a couple weeks now. He is the starter. That is who you want. Tua is likely to be back at the end of his IR stint, so this isn't a long-term play. $0, $3 bid, something like that. And Jameis Winston, we've talked extensively about. Watson, again, was terrible. He had only 165 yards or something like that on 29 attempts. Just a terrible, terrible showing. I know he had that 82-yarder to Cooper called back on a ticky-tack penalty, but even still, he just has been continually bad. They just lost to the Raiders. They're 1-3. I just don't know what they're looking for at this point. Obviously, the money is holding him into that starting spot, but I think they should bench him sooner than later. So Winston, again, if you have deep benches in a SuperFlex league, get Winston on the end of your bench. For running back position, I cheated again a little bit at this top part. I picked somebody as the top waiver claim that is over 50% rostered. He's the only one over 50% on this entire slide. And he's 57%, but that's Chase Brown. you want to get Chase Brown now. Okay, he just had a breakout game, 15 carries and a catch, 80 yards, 2 touchdowns. He worked at the goal line a lot, which is something that we thought Zach Moss was going to get. And Moss did have a 1-yard touchdown reception. So, I think it's not exclusively his role, but after a game like this, Chase Brown needs to be 100% rostered. You have to make sure in your leagues, if he's out there, that you add him, because if he is going to take over into the 1A as the season goes on, it's just too productive of a role to sit back and not act on when you have a chance off the waiver wire. So again, probably not on your waiver wires in competitive leagues, but just in case he is, make sure you go out and get him. 100% roster guy. This is somebody that I would spend 10 to 15% on if you do need a running back in your league. This is somebody that I think has season-long value. I thought about putting him as the waiver wire out of the week, but I didn't, because he is 57% rostered, so it's not a good chance he's available. Second guy here we're going to talk about is Kareem Hunt. He looked awesome, and he took over the starting role, right? Carson Steele fumbled on his first or second carry, whatever it was, didn't really play again. And it was Kareem Hunt's job from there on out. He looked good. He had 12 carries. He had a couple catches. There is Clyde Edwards-Helaire that is coming back this week that's kind of lurking, that we don't know what kind of role he's going to take on. But we do know of the 3 guys currently on the roster between Hunt, Pirine, and Steele, that Hunt is the one you want. So we also told you, do not spend a lot of waiver money on Steele. Don't spend a lot of waiver money on Pirine. Once they signed Hunt, once the rumors were coming out that they were going to sign Hunt, and we're here 1 week later, those guys are both cuts. Kareem Hunt's the one you want, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire is kind of like the one lurking that you might consider throwing a $0 bid at this week if you have the space. The third guy here, again, this one's pushing 50%, but it's 46%, so we still did put him on this list, is Alexander Mattison. So he had 5 carries and only 1 target in this game, but he had 60 rushing yards to Zamir White's 50 rushing yards on 17 attempts. Zamir has just been inexplicably poor this year in terms of performance, and it was the most carries he's gotten, but the fact that Mattison even still continued to outproduce him, I think, is a sign of things to kind of come here. I think Mattison is the one you want in this backfield. So again, similar to Chase Brown, just to a lesser extent, because I'm not as excited about Alexander Mattison just as a player. But I do think as the year goes on, he's going to turn into the 1A, and this is going to be the running back you want in this offense. The last guy here is Tyler Allgeier. So 34% rostered, not somebody that I've recommended really in the past at all. I do think that he is a very good handcuff to Bijan Robinson. So from that aspect, I think it's good to get him added if you're a Bijan owner. The reason I put him here this week is because Bijan is now nursing an injury and they play on a short week. So if Bijan were to possibly miss the game because it's a short week, I could see a situation where Allgeier is a top 15 running back this week. So you do want to try and get him added to your roster. Again, with a 1 week play, and it's a very big maybe. As a Bijan owner, maybe you put 3 to 5% on Allgeier. But overall, not somebody I'm going big after. Just need to mention him because Bijan is nursing that injury. Wide receiver perspective now. So we got Xavier Legette as our top waiver wire add here after Dontayvion Wicks. And we called this in the Beat the Waiver Wire last week, right? He was stepping into that number 2, and he performed in a big way. He had 6 catches, 66 yards, and a touchdown, and he had 10 rushing yards. That is a monster game from Legette, and something I think we can kind of count on moving forward. They need a second option next to Deontay Johnson, and Dalton was looking for Legette all over the field. Legette looked awesome too. It wasn't like he just fell into this production. He had 8 targets, so he caught 6 of his 8, and he looked like a first-round player, right? He looked like the guy that they drafted. So I would very much be in on Legette. Again, probably a $10 bid here because it is somebody that I do think has value until Adam Thielen is back. And then once Thielen's back, hopefully they just keep giving it to him, right? Thielen steps into the number 3 slot, not quite as big of a role, but we don't know that for sure. So over the next month, I think Legette is somebody that you definitely want on your team. But you do have that Adam Thielen coming back from IR looming over him. Next, we have Wan'Dale Robinson. I like Wan'Dale quite a bit here now. I do wish I had him on more teams. He obviously on Thursday night had 11 receptions, 71 yards. So it's not like he's ever going to be going off, but the consistent production, the consistent usage almost as an extension of the running game is very nice to see. And I do think the Giants offense just looks better in general than we thought it was going to. Obviously, all of the attention that Neighbors is taking helps open up Wan'Dale. When Wan'Dale was the number one option in the passing game, it just wasn't as good, didn't look as successful, didn't feel as reliable. And so now that we have him in the number 2 slot, getting a lot of targets after Neighbors, who is like the focal point, who they plan for on defense, and and have that second option in Wan'Dale here, somebody you want on your bench. I think it's a role too that will be his for the rest of the year as long as he's healthy. And so that's somebody that I want to be trying to take advantage of. Not more than 5% fab on him though, just a couple dollars. Again, a guy that you put on the end of your bench, if there's somebody big that comes available on the waiver wire, then he could be a cut candidate. So that's not somebody you want to spend a lot of fab. Next wide receiver up is Josh Downs. He obviously looked excellent this week, 8 catches, 85 yards and a touchdown. But I will say on the Downs front that a lot of that production came with Joe Flacco. So, if it is Anthony Richardson, I don't know that he's going to get this level of production. We did also see Michael Pittman go 6 for, 115-ish, 120, something like that. So, obviously their ceilings were elevated in a major way by having Flacco under center versus Anthony Richardson. So I wouldn't be going overboard to get Downs, but I will say that I think if it is Flacco this week, Downs can be a starter. But overall, he's a very talented player, still a very young player, still coming back from that high ankle sprain early in the offseason. So it was good to see him have a very productive game with the quarterback, that kind of matched his skill set. So as he gets more up to speed, sees more targets down the field, even from Richardson, right? Richardson was successful to pierce down the field. I think Downs can be successful down the field with Richardson. So this is somebody that you want to try and get on your bench so you can speculate with him as the season goes on. The last guy here, obviously tied directly to the injury to Rashee Rice, which was very unfortunate, JuJu Smith-Schuster. So in the offense, I do think that JuJu is going to be the one that steps into Rice's role. Not to say that he's going to get all of these targets and be this top-end receiver like Rice was. I just think where the receivers are going to line up, like they're going to keep Watson in the slot where he is. They're going to keep Kelce, obviously, as a big part of the offense on the tight end. But when the guy that's going to be lining up in the offensive scheme currently where Rice was is going to be JuJu. So that's why I put him on this list, right? You got Worthy on the outside. And I do think that JuJu's snap share is going to be the one that increases the most. So he's been about 50, but I could see that going up to 80. He was 2 years ago their kind of go-to guy. So if he has any juice left, I mean, he still is only 27 years old. I know he got cut from the Patriots, who have like the worst offense and the worst wide receiver room. But maybe it was just he wasn't a fit, and he can be decently productive here moving forward without Rice until they trade for somebody. I do expect the Chiefs are going to trade for somebody. So this is a $0 bid, $2 bid, just speculative right here for me. Going over to the tight ends. So I got Tucker Kraft as our top tight end option off the waiver wire this week. He played on like 85 or 90% of the snaps this week. So he has completely taken over as the number 1 tight end from Luke Musgrave. And he looked great this week. 9 targets, 6 catches, 55 yards and a touchdown. So I do think that there's some upside here with Kraft in a way that some of the other tight ends don't have because of the passing volume that Jordan Love can generate. Obviously, he threw over 55 passes, so it's not like, and they were down trying to catch up the entire game, all of the second half. So it was just throw. So he's not going to be doing anything like that on a consistent basis, but I do think he's worth a speculative add because he is playing on such a high snap percentage. And I think he, with Watson out, obviously we just talked about Dontayvion Wicks, but I do think that opens up additional targets just in the offense in general that can go. The second one on here is Noah Fant. I have not seen him play yet this week, so hopefully he doesn't go 2 for 5 or something, and then you're watching this saying, why is Fant number 2 on this list? But he did go 6 for 60 last week after having 2 kind of poor showings in the first 2 weeks. And so I am hoping he does pretty well against Detroit tonight, and he justifies being added additionally, right? The tight end position is just so bad. So if you get somebody that's going to see 6, 7, 8 targets per game, and he does that in back-to-back weeks, that's somebody that you need to be speculating on, especially if you play in any sort of tight end premium. Next guy on here is Cade Otten. We did see Otten produce now for the second time in a row. He had 8 targets in week 3 and then 9 targets this week in week 4. So he's showing out a little bit more, getting more involved in the passing game for the Buccaneers. And so This could have been tied a little bit to McMillan being out, but I also think just in general, they want to get a third guy going in the passing game, and that has been Otten so far. We saw down the stretch in the playoffs last year that he did pretty well. He stumbled out of the gate, only one target through the first 2 weeks, only one catch. But now we've seen 17 targets over the last 2 games, and he had 7 catches last week, 6 catches this week. Like, he could be getting going here in a way that, PPR league especially could be sustainable for your fantasy teams. So if you're struggling at tight end, another guy that I really like here. The last guy we're going to talk about here at tight end and for the waiver wire is Erick All. We mentioned him and Beat the Waiver Wire this past week, and it was very gratifying to see him get another 4 receptions this week. They made a point to get him involved. I know it was only 28 yards. So obviously take it with a grain of salt, right? You're not picking him up thinking he's going to be like this smash player, this guaranteed starter. But I will say he did increase his snap share over Mike Gesicki in a major way this week. He played on 60% of the snaps. Gesicki only played on 33% of the snaps. So I think as that continues to transition, some of that work between the 20s and this role is going to continue to increase for this talented rookie. And so if you do have a tight end stash, if you're just struggling really bad at tight end and you're going to end up picking up 2 of these guys, I think Erick All is somebody that you can put on the end of your bench, and I have a lot of hopes for over the second half of the season, especially as this passing game really gets going. We know the Bengals are slow starters, so the fact that you can add somebody like this onto your team who could be the third option as the year over the second half of the year in the offense could be very valuable for your team. So get Erick All on your team if you have the option to do that. All right, let's get into the week 5 trade targets now. So we got a lot of big names on this list for sure. So hopefully, you stick with us here, and hopefully some of these players are starting to become available in your leagues too. We've talked about a lot of middling names in the past, but I really wanted to go after some of these guys as we start the bye weeks coming up here now in week 5 and see if any of these guys are guys that you can try and acquire here. So the first guy at quarterback that we're going to talk about is Kyler Murray. He is QB9 through the first he is QB9 through the first 4 weeks. So there is a chance that the owner is not worried at all, but almost all of that production came in week 2. And he only had like 14, and 9 points in his other 3 games. So he has been, in my opinion, very underwhelming, and including 9 points against Washington this past week, where they just got absolutely crushed. I'm not sure I saw that coming. If there is somebody in your league that's down on Kyler, if you're in a 1 quarterback league, especially, and you can try and make a move for Kyler, that's something I'd be doing. But in a 2 quarterback league too, if you can go up and try and trade Kyler, anybody that's in the top, near the top 10, I would rather have Kyler than Dak, for example, over the rest of the year. And, I think that's something that if you add something to Dak, you could probably make a move up for Kyler. I would probably at this point keep Joe Burrow over Kyler. So that is a new move for me. I would also keep Jaden Daniels over Kyler. So I do think, I had a hopes that he was going to be QB4, QB5, but I do think there's a couple of guys there that are ahead of him now. So just to give you an idea of where I would slot him and who I would be trying to trade up to go and get him with. Another guy, I would definitely trade Mahomes to go up and get Kyler. I don't think Mahomes is going to be as good as Kyler moving forward. Second guy on this list should be significantly more attainable here, and that's Anthony Richardson. I think a lot of people are panicked on Richardson. This is 4 games. I know he got knocked out of this game early, but 3 games here now where he has done close to nothing. His passing looks very bad. His reads look very slow. But obviously, I do think that over the next coming weeks, especially over the second half of the year, he's going to be very good. He's also banged up now. He's hurt with that hip injury. So there's some uncertainty around his status for this week. So if somebody's struggling with bye weeks and also has Richardson that could be hurt possibly, go and talk to that manager. Try and take advantage of that and see if there's something there with Richardson. Maybe you can trade somebody from really far down and try and get him, like Derek Carr maybe. I know Carr hasn't been good the last couple of weeks, but he was good earlier in the year. Maybe go try and trade up with like a good flex player, a good wide receiver, and go get Anthony Richardson. I think that sort of move would be worth it at this point. I don't know that I'd be giving up Patrick Mahomes even, he's falling down rankings. I think even Andy Dalton, that range, I would probably consider just holding. But if you have like Aaron Rodgers, I would be looking to go up and try and get Anthony Richardson. So I do think I know I talked a lot about Richardson at this point, but I do think he is worth trying to get in your SuperFlex leagues because there is still that top end upside. Moving over to running back, Breece Hall, the first one here. He obviously was a very early pick, likely picked in the first round, even in your SuperFlex leagues. But he has been terrible. I'm sorry. There's no other way to put it, right? I mean, he got bailed out by touchdowns the first 3 weeks, and he had 7 catches in one of the weeks. He had a huge passing game role through three games, so but still hasn't really rushed the ball very well. I mean, he just had 4 yards in the most recent game on the ground against the Broncos too. I mean, like, come on, dude, like, get it going. And Braylon Allen's playing a ton now. I don't know. This is just a weird situation. I was not as high on Breece Hall in the preseason, in the early preseason, and then I kind of got sucked into pushing him way up, obviously with the upside. But I'm not sure how the Breece Hall owner is going to be feeling about him at this point. So if you can trade for him right now, this is as low as his value is going to get. I do expect that he's going to get much better. I do expect that they're going to continue to use him at the goal line, even though Braylon Allen got a goal line carry last week. I do think his passing game role, even though he only had 2 for 12 this past week, is going to still be there. So I think this was just a weird game against the Broncos. They obviously lost, which was terrible too. But check in with the Breece Hall owner, and if you can take somebody who's been very good, and try and go up, or even somebody coming back like Ken Walker, if he has a good game tonight, go up and try and get Breece Hall onto your teams. Second running back here, J.K. Dobbins. This one is pretty simple, I think, right? He had 2 excellent games against bad defenses that the Chargers won, and then they had 2 difficult matchups. He didn't do too much, and the Chargers lost both games. So I think, though, even in the losses, even in the down production, we got quite a bit of positive news on J.K. Dobbins. He has completely taken over a dominant share in this backfield from Gus Edwards. It's not even a competition. It's not even a split anymore. It's just all Dobbins until he gets to a certain touch threshold. And then Gus is going to be kind of spelling him here and there. So I do think with him going on bye this week as well, if you're, say, 3-1 and the 1-3 manager is the one that has J.K. Dobbins, right? Didn't play him in week 1, then played him in week 2, but lost one of those 2 weeks and then lost with him in their lineup 2 weeks in a row. There's an opportunity. There's a buying window here with him going on bye. If you do have a winning record, that I would go and try and aggressively get J.K. Dobbins. Last guy here is Zach Charbonnet. With Walker coming back, if you are the Walker owner, I would highly advise that you go and get Charbonnet. This is going to be, again, as low as his value is going to be. They just got good production from him, would be looking to sell, in my opinion, would be looking to sell. And so, if you can give up somebody off of your bench, somebody that you like, that could help you during bye weeks, potentially, right? But you can get Charbonnet to kind of lock up your Walker spot in your starting lineup. That's something that I think is very advisable, right? Like I was talking with Matt, he has Walker, and I was like, dude, you should be easily giving up Jacoby Myers to get Zach Charbonnet right now. And he's like, oh, Devontae's going to get traded. And I'm like, that's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Like you should be trading somebody of that value, somebody you think is going to be pretty good that's on your bench to get Charbonnet, because he is so much more valuable to your roster with Ken Walker on it than Jacoby is when you would have to possibly plug and play him if Walker's hurt, for example. So go get Charbonnet for the Walker owner. This is as cheap as he's going to be, and this is something that I think you can get done here. Going over the wide receivers, we did get news this week that Puka Nacua is going to be out for at least another month, which I don't think is surprising, right? He had a pretty significant knee injury. But at this point, right, if you're 3-1, 4-0, and you can pair, your flex position in a bench guy, maybe you have Zach Moss that you drafted late, that was on your bench, or Chase Brown has been on your bench for the whole year, one of those guys with a flex style receiver like Pickens, for example, and go get Puka. I think that that's something that's reasonable, right? Something that you can do, and something that an owner, if the Puka owner is 1-3, they should be looking to shop at this point because their season is slipping away quickly, and that's a valuable asset that they could be trading. So hopefully the team that has Puka in your league does have a poor record, because if they have a good record, they're not going to be just giving away Puka. They're not going to be selling Puka for whatever they can get in their starting lineup. They're going to be looking for full value for him, which is the case in our league. But overall, Puka, go check your leagues for if that team is struggling and go try and acquire him. Second guy here, breakout game, Ladd McConkey, against the Chiefs too, who have a pretty solid defense. So to see him score the touchdown early, to see him get involved 67 and a touchdown. Very productive game. Finally, it felt like it was kind of right there. He hadn't averaged over 10 a reception yet, but this felt like the breakout game. I know that they didn't really have much offense in the second half. They were struggling to kind of get it going. Obviously, the offensive line issues with Herbert just constantly under pressure obviously contributed to that. But I do think McConkey kind of established himself as the number one. I know Quentin Johnston had scored some touchdowns, had looked pretty good, but I do think overall that McConkey is the receiver you want here and is somebody that still could be attainable and somebody that, he hadn't been great through the first 3 weeks and then was good in week 4. So that owner of Vlad McConkey might be looking to sell as well. So go check in on that. I do think he's worth buying. Next guy down here, DJ Moore. He has been a massive disappointment so far. I think the whole Bears offense has been, but I do still think that Caleb Williams can get it going, right? They do have 2 wins. So that's obviously at least a little bit encouraging, but I think that overall, you should be looking to get DJ Moore. He's the number one on this offense. Rome Odunze didn't do much in this last game against the Rams. Keenan Allen didn't do much and has been banged up against the Rams here. So as Caleb gets it more going, I do think DJ Moore is going to be the one that benefits the most with the highest ceiling. I know in week 3, Rome Odunze showed that he had a pretty good ceiling and outproduced DJ Moore. But I think that breakout game between Caleb and DJ Moore is coming very soon. So the buying window on DJ Moore is going to be closing, and the owner that has DJ Moore is probably still going to be pretty bullish on the fact that he's going to be better. So try and buy him. Don't go crazy acquiring him. Again, this is a buy low option. The last guy here, I own him in a league, and the other league, my other main league, Matt owns him. So it's like, I'm not sure exactly what to do here, but Garrett Wilson. If you can acquire Wilson now, I think it's the time. Although I will be the first one to say that I am extremely disappointed with his production. He has been nothing short of terrible. You see he's wide receiver 41, and he's got a guy on his team that's wide receiver 15 in Allen Lazard. Very productive so far, scoring the touchdowns. I do think moving forward that Wilson's going to be better. He had a very tough start to the year in terms of matchups, right? And then just went against Surtain in week 4, and had a fumble, which isn't good. But overall, I do expect him to be better. I think that this week in week 5 could be his breakout game. They could just be looking at the offense as a whole, how bad it was against Denver, and just get Garrett Wilson the ball. Much higher target share coming this week. So if you can acquire him now, I think it's the last chance you're going to get. Going over to tight end. It's funny to see these two in the buying area, right? You got Kelce and LaPorta, who are my 1 and 2 tight ends coming into the year. They've both been terrible. But Kelce, obviously with the Rashee Rice injury, I had to include him here. If anybody thinks that he's still going to struggle and thinks that this game was a fluke that has Kelce, you should be buying now, because I kind of think at this point they're going to need him more than they've been using him. And so I expect that he's going to kind of ascend back into that top 3 tight ends. And I'm going to be ranking him that way moving forward now that this Rice injury has occurred. So if you can get Kelce now, it's the time. Overall, hopefully if you have Kelce, you're just going to hold tight because tight end has been so bad. But if you get a good offer for him, or you're able to counter and get somebody, say, like Garrett Wilson, who's been bad, and maybe the owner with Garrett Wilson hasn't even been using him. I think that that's something as a Kelce owner, if you have a backup option like David Njoku, for example, that you picked up off the waiver wire, I think that's a reasonable trade to be making right now. The other guy, Sam LaPorta, if you can acquire him, hopefully he has a dud game in terms of trying to acquire him on Monday night here. But I do think that LaPorta could be in position to start playing better. They go on bye next week. So again, another thing where if the owner with LaPorta is like 1 and 3 after week 4, and you can say, hey, he's on bye, I'm going to offer you, a replacement tight end with another good player. Not too good of a player, but another potentially startable player. That could get it done for LaPorta at this point. And so another thing you'd be doing is Brock Bowers has had 2 down games. If you have Bowers and you're able to get LaPorta plus something for Bowers, if your roster is in need of another starter, or if you're going to be struggling after injuries bye week, that's something that I would explore as well, because I don't know necessarily that Bowers is going to be the major threat that we necessarily thought through 2 weeks, because he has had a couple bad weeks now. So if you could turn him into like LaPorta and Vlad McConkey, say, for example, or something like that, that could be an interesting trade to explore. I'm not always necessarily a fan of going getting the 2 players. But if you're have injuries and you're in need of just additional starters, I do think LaPorta is somebody that you can possibly get in a Bowers deal. All right, and with that, thank you so much for watching, and we look forward to talking to you guys in the next one.